Welcome everyone. I'm Newbold, and this is Making Moving Management. If you guys not you we're coming to see you, feel free to get up and leave. I will get ready. Wait 10 minutes and my but right now we're good. So managers, right? How many here are currently a manager? Managers of people, managers of projects, products, all of the above. How many are interested in becoming a manager? Or just interested in understanding their manager better? I know some of them are kind of crazy. Good. Then I think we're on the right track. I want to talk a little bit about whether or not you might want to be a manager. I think you do, but maybe might have one on second thoughts. What to expect, and then kind of some of the aspects specific to us geeks about managers, and why someone who's your best engineer doesn't always mean he's the right one to promote to the manager next, and how you can prepare for management if that's something you're interested in. A little bit about leadership and about succeeding in management. So, I am no expert. I've done some management, seen a lot of management, good and bad. Actually, I've done some good and bad myself. One of my goals is that I want to make work a happier place for everybody. And I think a lot of that does kind of revolve around how the manager runs a team. There are a wide variety of styles. Some have consequences, good or bad. Sorry if I disappoint you. You blame the people that said at the top. So you think you want to be a manager, right? There are some fun parts of being a manager, but there are some not fun parts too. Some of the good things about being a manager. You'll probably get a promotion, maybe a title change. Sometimes it comes with more compensation. If it doesn't, you might want to ask about that. And usually people see it as a way of advancing their career, and usually that's the case. There are some not so good things about being a manager. People will expect more of you. Sometimes there's a little more risk. You're not just basing your job performance on your performance, but now on a group of other people who you don't completely control in most cases. If you figure that out, let me know. I might be interested. A lot of the time being a manager means you're always on call to some degree. If something goes wrong in your neck of the woods, you'll be getting a call. And some people just really aren't interested in that. I can't say I blame them. Longer hours sometimes is, if not a stated expectation, an unwritten expectation, that the manager is the first one there and the last one to leave, and taking care of all this stuff. There are a bunch of other things about being a manager that might be good, might not be good, depending on you, and depending on your workplace. The more responsibility part can be a good thing, unless that's something you don't want. It kind of goes along with the longer hours and the on-call stuff. There are different duties for a manager than what you're used to if you're in the engineering role. You're going to do a lot less coding and a lot more coaching and mentoring other people who are coding. You're going to spend less time working alone on your stuff and a lot more time collaborating with others. A lot of meetings in most cases, in my experience. And more variety. Depending on whether that's something you want or don't want, then that could go either way. How many of you find in your managing, for those of you who are managers already, how many of you find overall it's a very positive experience to be a manager? Not very many. How many find it to be overall negative? Okay, that's good. Not too many. And how many is it kind of a, sometimes it's got as good as bad? Okay. I think that's probably where most managers find it. There are some rewarding things to it, but it's a, what do they call that? Challenging opportunity. Part of what has a big effect on that is that managers have a lot of different roles. Depends a lot on where you are, what that exactly means. But you may have a very wide variety of responsibilities. Some of those are usually more fun than others. One that's pretty typical in a lot of engineering companies is a product manager. This is the guy who's making the decisions about what needs to be in the product. What are the business requirements? As you can see, a lot of different people might have different perceptions of what that means. The chicken with the head cut off, if you're doing it right, it's not that way, but it feels that way. Superman might be a little too much. The monkey thing, some colleagues will think that as a manager that you just forward emails around. And frankly, that is a big part of the job. Usually it's a value add forward, not just a forward. In a lot of companies, a project manager, not deciding project requirements, but trying to help manage timelines and balancing all the resource planning and who's going to work on what and when can we have this done by. That typically is a role that many managers who manage people, or even just a project manager who's managing projects, will have. The frustration, yeah, there's some of that usually. If you're coming from an engineering team and managing an engineering team, you're usually some kind of a development manager or whatever the corresponding thing in your neck of the woods is. Mythical Man Month is actually a really good book about organizing and running effective development teams. It's over, probably 30, 35 years old now, by Fred Brooks. Really good book. Kind of pioneered the idea of the surgical team style development team, where instead of having a team of developers and a team of back-end developers and a team of database managers and a team of system administrators that all have to, you have to involve every team to get anything done. He said, put some of each role on every team so that the team by itself can get everything done they need to. And actually, to me, it feels a lot like a forerunner to a Scrum team that we see a lot in Agile, where it's a self-organized team that's got everything it needs to get the job done. A lot of the time, dev managers may be guiding technical decisions, the architecture of the system, and if you're coming from the exact background of the people you're managing, this can be extremely common, that you're now the head guy who gets to say, no, don't do it that way, that sucks, and we're going to use this framework because I like it better, and that kind of thing. So deciding the standards, are we going to code this way or that way? What editors are we going to use? Usually you're responsible for managing productivity of your team, which can be challenging. That can be one of the bigger challenges a lot of the time in managing. And then if you're doing it right, it should involve a lot of, I think, coaching, mentoring, training, and helping the people on your team to get better at what they're doing. Most employees will really take well to that. Some will hate your guts, but most of the time people like to grow, learn, and get better at what they're doing. And if you're presenting it in the right way, usually you can, they'll enjoy it rather than helping, rather than hating it. Some of the other duties that fall to a manager usually involve some HR stuff. You will often be a therapist, though not licensed nor compensated as one. And most other people in the company will see you as their prognosticator about whatever is supposed to be happening with your team. They will ask you to estimate projects with absolutely no information, and they'll complain that your estimate is wrong when you give them a number that's just as much pulled out of nowhere as their plan was. So, good stuff. Any other questions, comments about manager duties? Are there other things that you guys see yourselves doing a lot as managers, or see your managers doing?
During my last annual review, I was told that I mother my team. And they said it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing. Fair.
Okay. No, I like mothers. It's Mother's Day this weekend. Mothers are great. And yeah, there is kind of almost in some ways a parental type responsibility and relationship. I care a lot about the guys on my team. I want them to be happy. I want them to be successful. I want to see them grow. Not sure how soon I want to see them leave the nest, but stay with me for a while. Yes?
I've seen with like my current manager, her need to do some conflict management when
Yes.
people have not been behaving appropriately or professionally, and do coaching in that regard, which I was really impressed with how she handled it.
Right.
I've also had managers in the past that really protected me
Yeah.
from all the extra stuff that, you know, I knew she had my back. So if anything was going on, she would go to bat for me. And
Right. Being supportive of your team is a huge, huge asset. And you're right, I didn't mention it up here, but really a lot of my time I end up spending it keeping the interruptions away from my team so that they can be productive. Even if I did sit down and try to code again, which I do from time to time, I find that I get so many interruptions that it takes me a week to get a half-day project done. A 10-minute or a half-hour project, yeah, I can get that done, no problem. But anything longer than that, and I just get so many things going on. Because so much of a manager's job ends up being around communication, both inside and outside of the team, that you really, it is a different kind of job than what you're used to if you're coming from an engineering background. Being a great engineer does not necessarily make a great manager. One of the interesting things about our industry is sometimes there's a tendency to take the best developer on the team and tell them, hey, you're going to stop coding and start going to a bunch of meetings instead. And sometimes it kills team productivity and sometimes even team morale. And sometimes the employee will just quit and leave because that's not even something they wanted anyway. So, you know, make sure that management is what you're really interested in before you go pursuing it hard. And if you're not interested in it, someone offers it to you, tell them how you feel. Say, well, you know, I want to be spending at least 3/4 of my time still coding. Is that going to be possible with what you need this job to do? And better to talk about that now than later. There are a few things that we have as geeks going into management that a lot of other managers don't. We have deep technical understanding, technical training that a lot of managers, especially project managers, usually do not have. And so we understand intimately how the project that we're managing is getting put together, and that can be an asset as long as we don't try and get into the weeds too often and interfere with the people on our team. But you might have noticed that the things that a manager is doing day to day has not so much overlap with the things an engineer is doing day to day. It's a different set of skills. We've gone to school usually for engineering. We've practiced for years at engineering. And then, boom, suddenly we've got all these new responsibilities that we haven't gone to school for, often haven't had any formal training on. Sometimes we might not even have many opportunities to practice. And that is, I think, the biggest single challenge of being a geek moving into a management role. It's a whole different ball of wax. And everybody who does it has different background, different stuff. We weren't hired for these skills, so they didn't check our resumes to see what we've done or not in most cases, unless you're already a manager. But there are a lot of things you can do, I think, to be both a great engineer and a great manager. One of the key skills is delegating. Instead of doing it yourself, you've got to learn to let other people do it. And for some people, like our penguin here, it can be hard. Some people refer to it as like giving orders or something. It's more like giving direction. We're a team working on this project. How are we going to get this done? Hey, could you help with this? And you're really good at that. Would you be able to do this? And kind of putting together the plan so all the bases are covered. But getting some practice at delegating and working on a team can be really helpful to being a successful manager. Sometimes you will have people on your team that have a different skill set than what you came from. If you have a sysadmin and you're a programmer, or if you have a database guy and you're doing JavaScript, that's what your expertise is in. You might have a situation where you don't know how to do the job that you're trying to teach them, help them grow into. And so, word of caution from our manager guy here is, don't try and tell them how to do their jobs if you don't know what you're talking about. Recognizing when you don't know what you're talking about is a huge skill. Actually, that works as an engineer too. Communication is really a big one. I don't even know if it matters if you can read the words on that last frame. One of the things that can sometimes happen to us as managers who have been geeks already is that sometimes when we're interacting with other managers or with our new boss, we'll try and speak in technical terms that they don't understand. Caution, don't do it. Usually they don't want all the details. They just want to know, when's it going to be done? How are things going? Are things on track? And it can be really, really tempting to go into a 3-minute explanation of why things are a week behind schedule. If they want it, usually they'll ask for it. Sometimes you also have to be the translator between the business people and the engineers, for lack of better names for those groups. That's an important role. So, problem solving. Don't go to your boss with a problem, go to your boss with a solution to the problem. This one applies actually double once you're a manager. Your boss really cares about results, and the people on your team will sometimes come and look to you for a solution. So providing the solution becomes a different thing. You're not going to go and write the code for them. You're going to be asked to help resolve a problem. Hey, do we do it this way or do we do it that way? And here are these options. Which one do they really want? But a manager who's really adding value in their organization usually is able to solve those problems without just taking the problems to their boss. Managing people can be one of the biggest challenges for a geek. We're not known for our social skills, frankly. So here's typical pointy-haired boss coming and trying to tell Dilbert what to do as he's trying to fix his problem. I like the frame down here. Pointy-haired boss thinks that what he's doing is managing, and that the alternative is chaos. And then Dilbert, frankly, he would prefer chaos. If this is managing, stop it. Leave me alone. Let me do my job. So learning the right ways to manage people. When is it appropriate, if ever, to sit next to someone while they're finishing the work until they get it done, and when it's more appropriate to follow up frequently or follow up less frequently. Engineering is an interesting one. I think engineers turned managers understand a lot better how hard it can be to get back into the zone when you get interrupted in the middle of a complicated problem. So don't do it to your team. Do everything you can to let them have as large blocks as you can manage without interruptions. Typically, rule of thumb around work is that if you get a 5-minute interruption, that's going to cost at least half an hour of really productive time. And so helping not do that to your guys and helping to keep other people from doing that to your guys can be very beneficial. I've been really tempted sometimes to get a really big stick and go sit next to where the engineers are working so that we can finally get some work done. It will be tempting sometimes to try and do their job, to code like you used to go, oh, this will be faster if I just do it instead of explaining it to you. It's kind of redundant. You're not the person that needs to do that anymore. Help them, let them grow, let them do their things. I talked with someone not too long ago whose manager publicly, in front of a bunch of other devs, more than once has told someone, no, you're not doing it right. Ripped the keyboard and mouse out of their hand and then sat down and tried to do it. I don't know if you've ever been on the wrong side of that, but actually both sides of that are wrong. It's not a fun feeling. And so as you practice your people skills, be sensitive to what you would like or not like if you were in their shoes, while still recognizing that their shoes are different. They might not like exactly the same things that you do or don't like. Any other questions about, yes?
I was just going to say, I will say on occasion that, one of my team will bring me something like, what we've been doing isn't working anymore. It's like, well, let me take a look. And, I will slide into there and, redo it again, just to see, okay, what's going on. Half the time it's just they forgot like a semicolon, parentheses.
Right.
But, at that point it's okay, because you're not doing it for them, you're doing a troubleshoot.
Right.
So you just have to realize where the difference between doing it for them and helping them troubleshoot is.
Yeah, there are times where it's appropriate to be an example. You say, oh yeah, let me show you how that works. You show them, and then have them do one. And then maybe have them show someone else how to do it. Paige, go ahead.
Do you ever set up time to pair with the people on your team, you know, where it's kind of structured, you're sitting there working alongside with them? You know?
You know, that's a good point. I have not done that. I do schedule regular one-on-ones, just to talk and see, you know, how are things going? How are you liking things? How is this job? Are you happy? What can I do to help make it better? But as far as pairing, you know, our teams, a lot of the time they do it with each other, but I don't always get the time to sit down and do that with them. Sometimes I do kind of drop in. I kind of feel uncomfortable sometimes because they're like, hi, what do you need? Why are you watching me? So it's a little weird, but maybe if I schedule time to do that, it wouldn't be quite that way. Have you been doing that with your teams and you found it beneficial?
Well, we have kind of an area where everybody on the team is pairing, but sometimes there's an odd man out, and I'll pair with them. But I sit over in that area with them. I have an office
Yeah.
that sits empty.
Yeah.
And I mean, that way I can be there to answer questions or more often deflect interruptions that aren't caused by me.
Right.
Right. But
Yeah. No, and that can be, even if you do have an office, and especially if your office is not very close to where your team is working, you know, that is a great suggestion. It's nice to have an office available, like if you need to go have a private conversation, but as much as you can, spend time with the team, see what they're running into. You'll see things by being there and hear things by being there that you won't ever have someone come up and tell you, you know, I think so-and-so's really kind of, they don't understand the right way to do this, they keep doing it wrong. Rarely will that happen unless you have a complainer on your team usually. But yeah, no, that's a great point. Are there other management strategies that you guys have found, you know, as you've transitioned from a technical role to a management role? What were some of the challenges you ran into? Anyone? You have one?
My big problem now is that when I became manager, I would encourage my people to, you know, we'd have lunch and learn. And, you know, because we are an internal chat line, you know, where people escalate issues to, I would send them to go and learn, and I would stay behind and deal with the chat line so they could learn, but now I have no clue what they do anymore.
Yeah, and that can be hard. There are a lot of times where I would love to just do something as a whole team, like bringing the whole team to this conference. But I get questions like, wait, you're all going to be gone? Who's going to be? It's like, well, I'll be on email, their laptops, and Wi-Fi. But yeah, it can be hard to manage that, navigate. I've been away from this. How can I step in and help my team
When I have no clue what I'm doing
to
anymore.
develop? Yeah. Yes.
I've run into like an issue before where if you promoted to manager position and it can kind of change the dynamics of the relationships of your coworkers with you. Like they can kind of see you differently or not really know. Like, and sometimes I've been kind of uncomfortable. How do I associate with them like I used to? You know, can I still be like, I don't know. I don't know if you have to like comment to that.
That's a good question. You know, every team is kind of different. For me, I think a lot of it has to do with the relationship that you had before. Usually someone who's getting promoted to a manager is already someone for whom the other team will have the rest of the team will have some respect for you, hopefully. If not, then your job is harder. But if they already respect you, you already have kind of a baseline of a relationship with them, then hopefully you can continue that and evolve that. You know, there's a philosophy about servant leaders that in order to lead, really what you're doing is doing what the team needs and the individuals on the team need. And so by serving and helping them, as long as they know that you've got their back, that you're there to help make things better for them, a lot of the time you can have a good relationship with them. One of the tough things sometimes is how formal or informal to be. As a manager, sometimes you'll have difficult conversations with them. You know, great friend, but its performance is kind of struggling a little bit. So how do you have that conversation with him when you're a friend and a manager and have to try and help him make some difficult changes? That really kind of gets to the heart of how it can be challenging. We don't get training in how to do that. These people skills are sometimes more foreign to some of us than others, but they are a different skill set. So, that kind of leads into, mouse, pay attention. Cack up the mouse. Preparing for management. So, one of the number one things you've got to remember to do if you want to move into a management role is perform well at your current job. I've known people sometimes who want a bigger, better job, and they're so focused on that they forget to do their own job well. It's kind of a prerequisite. They'll be thinking about firing you, not promoting you, if you're not doing well at your current job. While you're doing well at your current job, pay attention to what other skills you would need to take your boss's place or have a role similar to what your boss has or other managers you've seen. Take note of what those skills are and study them. There are a lot of free online resources. There are classes, sometimes in surprising places. The Boy Scouts has a great leadership training course they do for scout leaders, but the materials they pull from are all of the top executive trainers. And and then showing leadership where possible. It'll help your bosses to see you in a management role in their heads if they've seen you acting in a leadership role on the team you're on. Sometimes that may be official. Someone may make you a project lead or a lead something over something and give you an opportunity to do that. Good managers usually will try and find ways to let their people develop that way and practice in a safe environment. But some of it is leadership without even being in charge, so to speak. And I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And then, of course, take up juggling. You will have a whole lot of things going on as a manager. Learn to multitask effectively. I don't know what to say other than that comes with practice, I guess. But yes.
My recommendation, scheduling, whiteboard, write it down. Don't let things fall through the cracks. That's where I'm struggling. Is I will have a million things on my plate and, I forgot I had that project.
Yeah. No, it's so easy for things to get pushed down your priority list by all the new stuff and letting the urgent stuff get in the way of the important stuff sometimes. That really, being able to keep track of everything and finding a tool or a method that works well makes a huge difference. Yes?
I was going to say something different. It's important. Like, I just make a regular practice on everything that has to get done. I have a place to put it. And then I can review it and say, when is this due? Like right now I use Trello because I can access it on my iPad, on my phone, and on my computer. And I can tell, what's going on. And when I go to meetings, I can say, yeah, this is what's done so far, and this is what's left. It's very visual. But it has to be where you can see it. And if it's too complicated, it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's got to be easy to get to in any situation and easy to keep up to date. Because if it's out of date, it'll just make things worse. And if it takes too long to update, it'll get out of date. That's just how it is. One of the battles we've had kind of at work is we use a task manager, issue tracker type thing to manage our development tasks. And it's great for that. The developers work really well with it. They update it with their status. They log when they got things done, comments for communication. It's all documented all in one place, which is great. Except in this particular tool, some of the project management features are not stellar. And so it's not terribly easy unless everyone on the team is really being effective at logging their work and updating the remaining time on every task frequently. Most of them aren't. It's really hard to just at a glance see where things are. If you practice any kind of agile at all and have daily stand-up meetings or anything like that, that can be a great way to mentally, each day in your head, go through your list of top priorities and know where you are. So that when you bump into your boss or your boss's boss in the hallway, you say, hey, how's that thing going? You can say, great, we're 80% done. We should be done tomorrow evening. it's in QA, we're just waiting for them to sign off so we can deploy it. Because that might be all the time you have with your manager. And they like you to be self-sufficient in that management role, but at the same time, if they don't feel comfortable that things are well in order and under control, they'll start asking you more and more often for stuff. Sometimes it's just they're paranoid, but sometimes they legitimately are getting worried that something's going to fall through the cracks. One of the big things I think in being prepared to be a manager is learning how to lead without authority. It's a tricky thing. Sometimes we're not given any actual authority, but still can benefit the group by showing some leadership. Some people call it managing up, like when you're working with your manager, or leading from the side. Instead of leading from in front of somebody, you're leading from next to them. And this can happen a lot on an engineering team. One of the biggest differences in doing leadership with authority and without authority is you can't pull rank. You can't say, well, because I'm the boss, just do it. Which I think is a great thing, because usually when you do that, even as a manager with authority, it usually doesn't go that well. If you can learn to lead without using that card, it goes much better. So by practicing this before you get to be a manager, you can really help avoid a lot of challenging situations. If you can't convince, persuade, or otherwise get someone to do the right thing without rank, then sometimes even when you do have rank, you won't be able to get them to either. There's an exercise where you pair up, and one of you will make a fist, and the other of you has to try and get the other person to open their fist. What's the first thing you would try to get someone else to open their fist?
Throw a glass of water.
Okay. That's a good one. Ask him.
Just ask.
Ask him is surprisingly not always one that comes first to mind to some people. Some people will go and start trying to physically force their fist to open. There's some hard ways and some easy ways if you think about it. Yes?
I think it's important to be able to look at things from a lot of perspective, because I've been in team trainings, and one of the things that always came up is people would be given a task, and they created expectations about how that task had to be completed, even when there were no rules. And it was kind of interesting to watch how things tended to be more aggressive than cooperative, and just stuff like that. I think it's important to be able to mentally come up with different ways to look at things and approach things, even if you decide it's stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've got a few up here. Communication and persuasion are huge skills that help with this. Mutual respect is kind of a must-have. And in order to achieve mutual respect, when you only control yourself, you have to respect the other person. They have to know and believe that you respect them, and you have to act respectably so that they can respect you. There's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's been around forever. It literally is probably 80 years old or something. I mean, it's from the early 1900s, before 1950 even. It really says a lot of things in it that ring very true about how to influence people. One of the key things is, if you want to influence them, don't tell them why you want them to do something. Tell them why they want to do it. Find out what is motivating them, and tell them, well, let's see, you want to do such and such. Okay, well, in order to do that, if you do this, that'll help with that goal of yours. Whether it's having people like them, or making more money, or getting home earlier, or whatever it is. Don't tell them why you think they should do it. Tell them why you think they would want to. Find out what motivates them, and then talk about that. So there are a lot of things about leadership that really you can practice without being in charge. And most of the time, in most companies I've seen, other people will take notice of that. And you'll be a natural candidate for whatever next management opportunity they have that comes up. So, management opportunities. Depending on where you work, there may or may not be good opportunities where you are. If you're at a company where the guy above you has been there for 15, 20 years, and is probably another 15 or 20 away from being retirement age, You might want to see whether there are other opportunities outside of where you're currently working, or you might have to look at other companies really to find more management roles. That can be a tricky thing. Usually I find I think the best thing is to go talk to your boss about your career goals. Say, hey, I'm trying to prepare myself, kind of for the next level, and talk with them about what you're looking for. Talk with them about what they think that you could be doing to improve yourself, to be ready for that. And usually you'll find that they'll tell you. And sometimes once they know that that's something you're after, if they didn't before, sometimes they can even find ways or start noticing ways that they can start moving you in that direction where you didn't think anything was possible. But if they kind of agree with you, there's really not a whole lot of hope for something like that happening at the company you're at. It might be worthwhile trying to find other opportunities outside. And sometimes your boss will even help you do that. Keeping you here forever is not always in their best interests, because you'll lose interest, you'll get frustrated, and eventually you'll leave either way. So if they can help you leave on a good note and help you advance, then they've built a good, solid, long-term relationship with you that can survive after you're done working together at that company. Don't forget to practice management and leadership outside of work. There are a lot of opportunities you'll get, sometimes a lot more easily outside of work than you will inside of work. But they do at least as much usually to get you ready for management at work. There are a lot of different places. Volunteer organizations can be a great place. Church or religious groups might have leadership opportunities. The geek community, join a user group, go to meetups, present at meetups. Practicing communication skills like that can be a great help. Sports or other leagues, whether they're athletic or gaming community of some kind, or coaching little league, or whatever it is that interests you in your hobbies, you'll probably find there are some places where you might be able to exercise some leadership or management skills. One of the interesting things is some of these places are even better to practice at than work, because anytime you're leading unpaid volunteers, if they don't want to do what you say, they can just walk away, usually with very little to no consequence. So you've got to be extra good at being able to motivate them, keep them interested, keep them happy, even when what they want and what you or the organization you're working with want might not really be that well aligned. It's tricky, and that can be something that really well prepares you to be able to, it's related to leading without authority. If you don't have a paycheck that someone's staying to get, you've got to be careful how you do it, and you can get some really good practice that way. Even at home, your friends, family, roommate, whoever you are around a lot outside of work, practicing good communication skills there is never a bad thing. Learning how to communicate effectively through disagreements, how to resolve conflict, those are always beneficial, whether or not you're a manager. So let's say you already are a manager. How do you succeed? Again, not the expert at this, but I think there are a few key things. One is communication. How we communicate to the people on our team, to our supervisors, to our colleagues, to other people around the company can make a huge difference. There are people at the company where I work, there are a lot of different managers and directors and VPs and stuff, because it's getting to be a pretty big company. But there are some people who nobody really wants to work with. Their communication style comes off really abrasive or harsh, or they are so stuck in their beliefs that they don't want to listen to reason. They can't imagine that anything other than what they perceive to be the truth might be the truth. And being that person really does put you at risk. And eventually it gets to be such a big problem that you and the company have to part ways. Something has to give. So learning how to communicate effectively is really helpful. Even when you are the boss and you're in charge of your team, communicating with them will have a big impact on how happy they are with their job, turnover, and even your ability to hire. Because word gets around, especially in our community. People talk to other people. And people that you don't know other people that might be applying for your jobs. They'll just not even apply. You won't even find out about them because they know some other guy who said, oh yeah, I worked there, it sucked, it was awful. boss is a total dictator, you're not, yeah, and so that can have a huge and long-lasting impact if you're not communicating effectively with your team. How many of you have ever been on the wrong side of that, had a boss who kind of communicated less than well with you? Yeah. How did it feel?
Sometimes you didn't even communicate.
Right, that can be a problem too. I really like my manager a lot. On the spectrum between micromanaging and not managing, he's probably a lot closer to the not managing side. I think my end of year performance review was about 2 minutes of performance review and then about 28 minutes of the projects we were working on and some other stuff he had questions about. He stays out of my way, gives me a lot of autonomy, which can be a great thing. But I know some of my colleagues are a little more uncomfortable with that. They're, some of the technical stuff is newer to them. They haven't come from an engineering background. So, always knowing who you're managing and what their needs are can make a huge difference in how successful things are. Yes?
This keeps me up at night is I've heard that people don't leave their job, they leave their manager.
A lot of the time, I would say that's true. I know of a lot of examples. There was a particular team where I worked that historically had awful turnover, and many of the people who had worked on that team would directly cite this manager as the prime reason that they left. And even in who they were trying to hire, they would come and have an interview with this manager, and you're like, oh, no, don't want to work there. And so the best talent wouldn't say yes to us. And if they did, and then found out what he was like, then they'd leave. We couldn't hold on to good people. And it's only by fixing those situations. Eventually they did something where they put him in a management role where it was more of an architect role than a managing people role. So no one directly reported to him. That solved a lot of issues. But there are other, that really as a manager, you have probably the single most influence on your team's happiness with their job. I don't think that's untrue at all.
How would you handle a situation where you have a lot of really intelligent, wonderful people, you have 2 people on the team, both have skill sets that you actually really want to keep on the team, and neither of the 2 talk. They have decided that I am right and I am right and that's that. And you can't get, how do you deal with that kind of situation? It's the right way to not lose either and yet figure out a way for them to become team members when they won't listen to each other because they don't have that respect.
That is a tough thing. When you have people on the team that don't respect each other, that breaks the communication, like you said. It doesn't happen, and then they can't function effectively together. Depending on the employees, sometimes I've had success with just the frank conversation. Look, what's your beef with so-and-so? You guys don't talk, and I need you to talk.
What if the management's already aware of that, but we haven't figured out a way to bridge that gap, if you will?
You need to remind them all.
Yeah. Team building exercise, go make them do like the thing where they fall off into the people catch up.
I see an overseas.
Well, it's interesting because you look at, having been, maybe one of the stronger opinionated people before. It's interesting though because you have 2 people that are probably very afraid. What are they afraid of? Of losing. Because their role on the team is to be the smart guy, or they have to know everything. Now, if A and B are arguing, A wants to be the smart guy, but B wants to be the smart guy too. And it's not about what's best for the team. It's about positioning themselves as the smart guy on the team. So how do you solve that? You change the positions. It's not about being the smart guy on the team. Crucial Conversations is a really good book.
Yeah? I haven't read it, but I've heard.
I've read it several times.
Yeah.
But it's, because what you want to do is you want to have this conversation without the adrenaline. Because what's going to happen? We're like actors in a play often.
Yeah.
And this is very common, especially in marriages, where you have actors and you have these arguments that are templates, basically based on the template, because Oh, my wife says this, that means I must respond this way. That means she must respond this way. What happens if you mix it up and you don't respond that way? It's in, there's different techniques to do conflict resolution, but you got to look at what's really going on here. And it's two people who are afraid of looking like the dumb person. Now, what's going to be the best solution? Probably not A, probably not B, probably a combination of both. And how do you get to that best solution? If you can actually get these guys to work together and come up with a solution together, then they're not jockeying for position anymore, because it's their solution as a group, not individual solution. Oh, those are just some of my thoughts.
That's great. Is anybody else in this situation?
It's not, definitely not bananas.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, I was in a really bad situation where a coworker was like borderline abusive. I mean, he would make comments in meetings towards me that were really disrespectful. He would, and it's like, I walked around with eggshells, just on eggshells. And I was actually ready to just say, okay, you have to find me another job, because I'm not gonna live like this. I'm waiting for this guy to just blow up. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm clearly pushing his buttons. And I was so grateful that my supervisor got in there. She didn't handle it publicly, but whatever she did, she'd pull him in, they'd have conversations, and I don't think she targeted, like, do you like Amy Jo or not? I suspect what she looked at was, okay, this was some unprofessional behavior. She started looking at what's going on here. I mean, I think she really tried to understand what was going on in his life too.
Yeah.
But
That can,
because
sometimes it's not even related to work.
exactly, and there was a lot going on in his personal life, but over time, I was just astounded at the change in our working relationship, because I went for months going, who's gonna hit me, type of thing, and now, and then later, like months later, I was like, wow, he hasn't said a single icky thing. I've had moments where I went, wait, is something gonna happen? But it never happened. But I think sometimes you have to focus on the specific relationship, and sometimes you have to focus on, okay, let's talk to this person. What's going on with you? What are you doing that's working, and what are you doing that's not working? And if it's not working and it's affecting the business needs, that's a problem. And sometimes you can address that specific thing more than you can the personality. And then over time, if you develop that relationship of trust, then more can come out. But sometimes you have to focus on the piece, not the whole thing.
Right, no, I agree. And I think some of the things you said there are really, having that relationship of trust is important. They need to trust you if you're going to basically be a therapist, counselor, advisor, and try and tell them, hey, this is becoming a problem. You've got to have that trust so they know that you're not doing it because you hate them, you're doing it because you love them. You care about them, you want them to be successful, you want the team to be successful. And they've got to know it's not that you're angry, it's not that it's that, it's a problem and we've got to solve it. And you're good at solving problems, help me solve this problem. You also mentioned talking to them, understanding what's going on. Empathy and understanding is one of the hugest things, I think, in being able to navigate these challenging personal things. There's something going on that that's causing this. There was a situation I know of not long ago where Party A and Party B both thought that this thing in the middle was their responsibility. And when Party A had been given that responsibility by their boss, and then were asked, hey, go get some feedback from this other person too, they would go get feedback, and then they'd try and take over the project and wonder, why are you working on this? Well, my boss assigned it to me. Well, yeah, but, and it turns out that all this fighting over this thing was because this one had been told by their manager, hey, this is your responsibility. And the other person also thought that that should be part of their domain, their responsibility.
Yeah.
And it was just a misunderstanding, really. But when we got it figured out, then, everything became so much more clear when we understood that he thought this other person was stepping on his toes. Well, yeah, because he thought he was, understanding really. understanding is key to being able to work with those relationships. Does that help a little bit with what you're trying to do? I mean, I know it's not something terribly concrete. There are a million ways and many right ways to resolve those, and some of them are really hard.
Well, I have to be honest, I'm actually one of those two people.
Oh, yeah.
And I already recognize where I'm at in it, and I recognize that if the two of us could actually find a way to be a team, that with the skill sets we have, we could actually find outcomes.
Yeah.
I'm finding a way around my...
Yeah, the good news in that is that it's a lot easier when you are one of the two people to be able to solve it than when you're the manager of the two people and neither of them want to solve it. Wanting to solve it is the first part of it. Sometimes it's, I found that in a lot of cases, a little bit of humility, even if you don't really think you're wrong, can go a long way. And I don't know if that's, I mean, sometimes people just feel threatened. You know, they see how right you always are, and sorry, you know, maybe I'm not right, maybe you're right. And maybe we're trying to say the same things, but just saying it in different ways. You know, there are a million different situations and a million different ways to solve it. So, communication obviously is a big part of being a leader. I think probably secondary to being able to communicate well is you'll be expected to lead in execution. Your team has to execute something. They've got to deliver. Being able to do that well will help make you a successful manager, I think. It depends a lot on what you're trying to do and what that responsibility is, but don't lose sight of the team you're running has to deliver, or your bosses won't be happy with you. And then number 3, I think, a really important thing sometimes gets overlooked is coaching and mentoring your team, helping them to get better at what they're doing, not to repeat the same old mistakes all the time, to be able to even advance in their careers, even if it means that eventually they make it off your team. It's not a bad thing, I think, to have a reputation as a team that grows people up and then moves them on. You know, have people on your teams being getting promoted to be your colleague, you know, a manager in some other role. You know, that's a great thing, and people will recognize that and respect you a lot for being able to do that. It's a cool thing. There is no question that you will run into difficult situations, and you will sometimes do things that I won't call them mistakes, because at the time of what you knew, it might not really have been a mistake, but you'll wish that you could have done it differently. It happens. It will happen. It will continue to happen. But most of the time, I think if you just don't worry too much about it and relax and communicate with people, that things can work themselves out. Can you, Joe?
I just want to say one of the best classes I ever took that's helped me with this was a class on mediation.
Yes.
And I mean, I just was surprised at how much I got out of that in using it in both my personal and professional life. And you can't always take a class, but there's good books. There's one,
Yeah.
you talked about one, there's also a really small book called Difficult Conversations that's just small. We used it in that class. There's
Yeah.
The Intelligent Negotiator that we
It's absolutely true. Mediation, conflict resolution.
I think that's the hardest thing for people.
Yeah. It is a skill that is hard to master and often needed, and sometimes, frankly, is very foreign to people coming from an engineering background. The code, as long as they do it right, it just does what they tell them. And learning to try and convince people who, as rational as they might seem in most of their work, we act irrationally in certain ways, and it's different for everybody. That's hard. Saw this one. It made me think, yeah, you know, good manager, a guy who has to lay somebody off, but then helps you get another higher paying job with somebody that you know is in another company. Sometimes you won't have a choice, and you'll have to make cutbacks and hard decisions, but there are things you can do to make it better. Know your team and what's going to be most effective for them. 2 types of managers, those who are really involved and those who just leave you alone. Some of your team will want number 1, and some of your team will thrive more with number 2. It's interesting, but as you get to know your team and the people on it, usually it's not terribly hard to identify which one you want to be. Remember when you were being managed, or all the times you have been managed. don't do things that you wouldn't like, because they probably won't like them either. I found it really helpful to try to be extremely self-aware of what I'm doing and how those around me might be perceiving it. Just to make sure I'm not out in left field, crazy. And the beatings don't always work.
One thing that I found worse with my team, because most of them have been promoted from like the billing support or the tech support or whatever.
Yeah.
So they're not used to being in a more professional environment where it's, you do your work and you love it. And the big rule on my team is, you're all adults. If you act like adults, I will treat you like an adult. If you don't act like adults, I will treat you like one of my children, and neither of us will be happy.
Right. Yeah. No, I would not be able to survive with the team that I have and doing the things that we need to do if they weren't able to take delegation and deliver on it. If I couldn't say, hey, we've got this problem, can you go research it and tell me what you find? That is huge. And being able to trust people enough to do that and do it right, and train them and help them grow into that if they need to, it's a win-win. Everybody benefits from that. So hopefully there are a few takeaways that have been helpful from our discussion today. Thanks for your participation. As I would say, management can be a fun and challenging opportunity. Make sure that it's what you want before you jump into it. Go in with both eyes open so you're not disappointed. It can be a great benefit to have a geek skill set before you start. Great engineers do not necessarily make great managers, but they can. There are skills you want to develop to be able to do it. And if you want to be a manager, start preparing for it. If you build it, they will come kind of. And if you want to be successful as a manager, really I think as long as you have that desire and keep putting effort into it, things will keep getting better and better, and you'll accomplish your goals. Are there any other questions?
So in my situation, my boss got promoted recently, and she isn't encouraging me to apply for her old job.
That's a great sign.
And so I did, and I haven't heard back or anything. But one of my concerns is, what if I do it and I just decide that I like being a developer better down the road? Like if I ever leave where I'm at right now, is that a bad thing to have on my resume if I want to go back to being a developer?
To me, it's not, and I have seen that situation. I think being honest in the interview with someone who you're talking to when you move and just saying, I tried being a manager, but really I found it pulled me away from the code too much. I want to work with my hands, and people will respect that and know that they've had management experience, so they can be a team lead, they can lead a project if they need to. I just won't make them manage people, and we'll be good. And that can be a great asset. I don't think it's bad to go backwards. Some companies actually have two different kind of career paths that you can choose between, or even jump between. Some will have the management track where you go from managing a small group of people to managing a group of people who manage other people to, and up and up and up. And on the other hand, there's junior, mid, senior developer, a principal developer, or maybe an architect type role. And there can be a lot of growth and influence there. You can be an influencer over how an entire team of 200 people build something and not manage a single person. And that can be really rewarding too, without even really getting onto the people management side, but staying on more the product management or the technical architecture, technical management. So that's a great thing. There are pros and cons to being manager, and I don't blame people for not liking some of them. Some of them are not fun. But any other questions, comments? Okay, we're out of time. Thank you very much.